The Pentagon has a statement they give to the press, to Congress, and to the American public. They've been giving it in some form for over 75 years. They say, "We have no evidence of extraterrestrial origin." They say, "Many cases have mundane explanations." They say, "The phenomenon remains largely uncharacterized, but we're working on it." That is the official position of the United States government. And if that were the whole story, this video would be about 3 minutes long. In 2026, through a federal program called PURSUE, the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters, hundreds of previously classified documents were made available to the public. Not leaked, not obtained by whistleblowers, released by the government on a government website. And what's inside those files is not a single smoking gun. It's something quieter than that, and in some ways, more difficult to dismiss.
Let's establish something clearly. UFOs, the cultural version, are easy to dismiss. Decades of tabloids, bad movies, and fringe radio hosts have made UAP synonymous with credulous people who see things in the sky and want them to be something extraordinary. That skepticism is healthy, and the government's own data supports most of it. That's the baseline. Most of what gets reported has an explanation. Most of what gets filmed is misidentified. Most analysts who look at these cases find something mundane. This is true, and we don't want to lose it. But the PURSUE archive, released publicly beginning in May 2026, doesn't contain the mundane cases. By design, it contains the ones that didn't resolve. 75 years of officially filed, officially investigated incidents. In a subset of them, a number the government has not publicly quantified, sit in that archive with one designation still attached, not because they stopped looking, because after analysis, using the government's own instruments and the government's own analysts, they still couldn't explain what they had. That's where this goes. The PURSUE releases don't offer a single revelation. They offer a structure, the same categories of characteristics, appearing in different decades, reported by different people, collected by different instruments, filed in different agencies. Let's go through them in the order that the evidence becomes harder to dismiss. 1948, New Mexico. The Armed Forces Special Weapons Program, the direct successor to the Manhattan Project, responsible for America's nuclear arsenal. Their internal documents, released as DOW-UAP-D017, record 209 separate reports of luminous spheres and green fireballs observed over restricted airspace near Sandia Base, Los Alamos, and Kirtland Air Force Base. Not reported by civilians, filed by military personnel with security clearances, people whose professional responsibility included distinguishing actual threats from visual artifacts. The reports were serious enough that ground teams were deployed to the observation sites. Those teams, according to the same document, collected samples from the sites where the objects had been observed at low altitude. Their analysis logged copper-bearing particulate at the recovery locations. Now, the document does not claim this is exotic. There is no definitive source identification. Alternative explanations, industrial contamination, meteoritic material, lab handling issues, are not ruled out in the released material. What the document says is that it was collected, analyzed, and filed. The investigators didn't call it proof of anything. Neither will we. But they didn't call it explained either. 1973. A CIA intelligence report, sourced from a human asset, describes a luminous green object observed over Soviet territory. The object generated what the document calls concentric visible rings before dissipating. The assets report emphasizes one detail that the analysts flagged: complete silence, at altitude, moving, in silence. This document predates Pursue. It was partially declassified in 1978 through CIA FOIA processes. Its inclusion in the 2026 Pursue archive, alongside the newer material, is a cataloging decision by the current government. The point isn't that this document alone proves something. The point is what it sits next to. This is where the story changes gear. In the earlier files, the 1940s, the 1950s, you could argue the instruments weren't good enough. Ground investigators misidentify contamination sources. Witnesses conflate things in the dark. The modern cases don't have that problem in the same way. The 2023 cases released through AARO and CENTCOM include footage of an object tracked over the eastern Mediterranean, executing sharp direction changes, approximately 90 degrees at roughly 80 miles per hour at low altitude near the ocean surface. AARO's analysts noted the case. Their assessment: the maneuver falls within an anomalous performance envelope, but the data does not conclusively rule out a small drone, an unconventional balloon, or a sensor artifact. It remains in the unresolved category. Note what AARO said, and note what they didn't say. They didn't say, "This is explainable." They said, "We cannot confirm what it is." That is not the same statement. That classification exists in their own documentation, and cases bearing it remain open. The question the older files raised was, what did we see? The question the modern sensor data raises is different. It's, if we can measure it this precisely, why can't we explain it? The Pursue archive reveals something about distribution. The reports don't spread evenly across the country, proportional to population density or to the number of people looking up. They concentrate. Now, there is an obvious alternative explanation for this pattern, and it deserves to be said clearly. Classified facilities have more sensors, more radar, more trained observers filing more formal reports through more secure channels. Of course, they generate more documented incidents. That's not conspiracy, that's reporting infrastructure. But the AARO analysts themselves have noted, in their annual reports to Congress, that the concentration of UAP reports near restricted and nuclear-adjacent airspace is a documented pattern that they continue to monitor. Not because they've concluded it means something exotic, because they haven't concluded it means something mundane. A filed federal law enforcement report. A sphere. Orange. Stationary. Silent. Submitted through official channels. Archived in a government database. Status: unresolved. And here's the paradox that has been building through everything we've looked at. The Pentagon says, no evidence of extraterrestrial origin. The same Pentagon funds active collection programs, files annual classified briefings to Congress, and redacts significant portions of the documents they choose to release. If the remaining unresolved cases were simply insufficient data, noise, balloons, drones, the level of ongoing investment and classification would be, as a matter of institutional logic, disproportionate. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a bureaucratic observation. The question it leaves is simple. What exactly are they still protecting? Let's be precise about what we've established. We have not proven these objects are extraterrestrial. We have not proven they represent a foreign adversary's technology. We have not proven anything beyond what the documents themselves contain. What the documents contain is this: a 75-year record of officially filed, officially investigated, officially unresolved observations. accumulated by the most instrumented military apparatus in human history, not by people who were confused, by analysts whose job was to find the explanation. And in a documented subset of cases, they couldn't. In 2026, more of that archive became accessible than at any point in history. AARO says, and the data supports this, that the majority of UAP cases resolve to mundane explanations when sufficient data exists. That's important. That's the honest baseline. But the Pursue archive isn't a record of resolved cases. It's a record of the residue. The cases that had enough data to analyze, enough seriousness to investigate, enough institutional weight to classify, and still came back without an answer that everyone agreed on. The Pentagon's official position hasn't changed. No evidence of extraterrestrial origin. But the Pentagon's behavior, the collection, the classification, the ongoing funding, the redactions in the documents they themselves chose to release, tells a slightly more complicated story. Not of aliens, not of cover-ups, of a question that 75 years, billions of dollars, and the best sensor technology ever deployed has not fully answered. Maybe the most significant thing inside the new Pursue files isn't any single incident. It's the fact that the files exist at all. That someone, for 75 years, kept deciding this was worth writing down, worth classifying, worth keeping. The government does not know what these objects are. That is their conclusion. After 75 years, that is the document.